With the signing of the Treaty of Versailles in 1768, the Republic of Genoa ceded all its rights over Corsica to France. At that time, the acquisition of this island by France seemed like a minor gain. However, this agreement would indirectly change world history. The following year, in 1769, a child named Napoleon was born in Corsica. His father, Carlo Bonaparte, was a lawyer. After the island came under French rule, unlike many of his colleagues, Carlo Bonaparte embraced French rule and entered the service of the French. By 1771, he had been declared noble in return for his services. In January 1779, Napoleon's family sent him to France for education purposes. Initially enrolled in a religious school, Napoleon entered the Brilliance military school within the same year. His intelligence and analytical skills stood out, and he excelled in his studies. He had a special interest in mathematics and geometry, and his success led to his acceptance into the Paris Royal Military School in 1784. Behind every success lies significant challenges that need to be overcome. Napoleon's life was, in fact, composed of these challenges behind his achievements. While continuing his education in Paris on February 24, 1785, his father Carlo passed away. After this, the Bonaparte family began to experience economic difficulties to the extent that young Napoleon's education came to a halt. However, with diligent work, he managed to graduate by completing a 2-year course in just 1 year. In 1785, he was assigned as a second lieutenant to the artillery regiment where young artillery officers were trained. In the early years of his military service, he frequently took leave to visit Corsica and spend time with his family. By the year 1791, Napoleon joined an organization called the Jacobin Club, which played a significant role in the French Revolution. This club was initially established by anti-royalist members of the Assembly in 1789 and later evolved into a republican movement throughout the country. Napoleon believed that joining this club would be beneficial for him in the future. In those years, France was like a boiling cauldron. Taking risks was necessary to rise, and Napoleon was a daring man who could take such risks. By 1792, the French people took to the streets due to the worsening economic situation and increased taxes resulting from prolonged wars. The rebellion spread across the country. While attempting to escape the country, King Louis XVI was caught and publicly executed on January 21, 1793. This execution news created a shock effect in other European countries. If the revolution spread to other countries, other European kings might share the same fate as Louis XVI. European monarchies could not turn a blind eye to this situation. Therefore, they began preparations for war against France. The newly established French government, without giving them a chance to prepare, declared war against Austria and Prussia. During the war, the Jacobins in power had begun executing anyone they deemed guilty and opposed to the revolution. They believed that such oppression would make the people unequivocally accept the revolution. However, these pressures backfired, leading to numerous local uprisings in French cities. During this period, the Jacobins seized power through a coup, but nothing changed. Under their rule, the brutality escalated, and thousands of French citizens were executed by the guillotine. The power struggle turned France into a veritable bloodbath. Many uprisings in various cities were brutally suppressed. Nevertheless, royalists in the city of Toulon rebelled in 1793 due to the massacres carried out. Moreover, they sought help from England. The British saw this as an opportunity. If the support for the uprising in Toulon succeeded, it could spread throughout France, and England might easily defeat France. For this purpose, the British fleet, led by Lord Hood, was dispatched to Toulon. The French government, on the other hand, sent General Carteaux to the region to quell the rebellion. The biggest problem in the French army was the lack of skilled officers. After the revolution, Many officers fled the army out of fear of execution or imprisonment. Even General Cartaux was not originally a soldier. He was a former artillery officer. Moreover, at a time when skilled officers were urgently needed, a young artillery officer had been wounded in Mardin and sent to Paris for treatment. An urgent replacement was needed for an artillery officer. Anton Saliceti, also a Corsican, had recommended a young artillery officer named Napoleon Bonaparte to General Carlo. This young officer was only 24 years old and quite inexperienced when he was appointed to the position. Not much was expected from him. However, he would exceed all expectations. After taking command of his unit, Napoleon launched an attack on British soldiers. Despite being wounded in the hip during this attack, he defeated them and reached the coastline. Thanks to the artillery shots he initiated against the ships, he caused the English to lose morale. Although not much was expected from him as an inexperienced artillery officer, Napoleon became the name that brought victory to France. Following this victory, Napoleon was promoted to brigadier general. Under normal circumstances, such rapid advancement for an officer in the army was not possible. However, due to the shortage of officers in the army caused by the revolution, he had the opportunity. His proximity to the Jacobins also played a significant role in his promotion. Napoleon was now being referred to as the hero of the hour. He had harnessed the winds of the revolution and was rapidly climbing the career ladder. However, this wind would unexpectedly carry him to a place he had never anticipated the following year. In July 1794, the National Convention ousted the Jacobins and established the Directorate regime. Due to his proximity to the Jacobins, Napoleon was arrested. However, his imprisonment did not last long. Within 2 weeks, the charges against him were dropped, and he was released on August 20th. Nevertheless, despite being at war, he was not assigned to any military duty, and it seemed he had not gained the trust of the new regime. While Napoleon waited in hopes of receiving a task in Paris, Royalists initiated an uprising on October 3, 1795. Tens of thousands of French citizens took to the streets to change the regime. At that time, there were only 5,000 soldiers in Paris, and this number was insufficient to suppress the rebellion. Moreover, no senior officer wanted to risk commanding these soldiers because, in case of failure, they would likely face execution by the rebels. However, Napoleon believed that the uprising could be easily suppressed. All that was needed was to be ruthless. Eventually, he accepted the mission, setting the condition that no one interferes with him under any circumstances. He immediately ordered his soldiers to find as many cannons as they could. Within a short time, 40 cannons were found. He instructed the cannons to be placed in critical locations. As the rebels launched their attack at the first light of dawn, they were immediately fired upon under Napoleon's command. Soon, the streets of Paris turned into a bloodbath. Severed limbs, screaming people, and the terrifying noise of cannons caused the rebels to quickly disperse. Napoleon once again became the savior of the revolution. This success led to his promotion to general, and shortly after, he was appointed to command the army of Italy and sent to the front. This uprising in Paris worked to Napoleon's advantage, allowing him to regain his former popularity. On March 27, 1796, Napoleon reached his unit in Italy and would command a military campaign for the first time. In fact, the forces he commanded constituted only a small part of the war. His task was mainly to engage the Austrian army. The main French army was placed under the command of Generals Jourdan and Moreau, expected to advance into the German interior and then reach Vienna, bringing victory to France. When Napoleon arrived in the region, he noticed that the army under his command was in a difficult situation. Soldiers' salaries were irregularly paid, the supply of the army was inadequate, and the soldiers were not properly nourished. Many soldiers lacked equipment, Some did not even have rifles. Napoleon took command of this struggling army when he was only 26 years old. Initially dismissed by other generals as a short, clean-faced youth, he would soon impress everyone with his leadership and energy. In a speech to his soldiers, Napoleon expressed his appreciation for their patient waiting in hunger and nakedness, but emphasized that waiting would not yield results. Instead, he promised them to conquer the wealthy cities of Italy, gaining wealth and fame. Empowered by his speech, the young general took command of his inspired soldiers and achieved consecutive victories against the Austrians. Finally, at the Battle of Lodi, he inflicted a heavy defeat on them and forced the Austrians to retreat. While leading this battle, he became so immersed in the war that he personally loaded and fired cannons, rushing around like a low-ranking soldier. His energy and determination made his orders unquestionable. He was like a friend to the soldiers, and they had infinite respect for this young man fighting alongside them. Continuing the campaign, Napoleon pursued the Austrians to the outskirts of Vienna, compelling them to make peace. Although the main operation was planned to be conducted from the north, Napoleon alone defeated the Austrians and became the man who won the war. On October 18, 1797, France and Austria signed the Treaty of Campo Formio. Thus, the First Coalition War concluded with a victory for France, and Napoleon returned to Paris as the hero who won the war. The coalition had collapsed, but the war with England was still ongoing. Upon the order of the French government, Napoleon began preparations to invade England. However, this was unlike any other campaign. He knew that attacking England across the sea would be very difficult. As superior as the French were on land, the British were equally superior at sea, and such an attack could turn into a disaster. Instead, Napoleon decided to pursue an indirect strategy. If he could invade Egypt, he could seize the shortcut to England's colonies in the Far East, undermining British trade and forcing France to impose peace on England. With this goal in mind, the young general devised a new plan. He got the government to accept this plan and began preparations for the expedition. Eventually, under his leadership, the French fleet anchored in Alexandria on July 1, 1798. Initially, the progress of the French army was swift. They quickly took control of Alexandria. They then advanced along the Nile, establishing dominance throughout Egypt. Continuing the operation, Napoleon turned towards Palestine, capturing the territories there as well. However, in the Siege of Acre, he suffered a major defeat at the hands of Cesar Ahmed Pasha and the British forces. Following this defeat, he had to withdraw to Egypt. While Napoleon fought in Egypt, war had resumed in Europe. European states, wanting to reclaim what France had lost in the War of the First Coalition, rallied once again with the support of England and declared war on France. France had lost on many fronts in this war, and confidence in the regime was diminishing. Napoleon, on the other hand, saw this situation as an opportunity. As he had always done, he could emerge as a savior in these challenging times and elevate his position. Having already suffered defeat in Egypt and the prospect of success in that campaign appearing quite bleak, he decided to abandon his troops and return to France with 3 ships in August 1799. When Napoleon arrived in Paris, although the unfavorable course of the war in France had partially begun to improve, the situation was still quite dire. Napoleon was accustomed to turning such dire situations into opportunities and emerging victorious. Now he was looking for an opportunity that could be seized. But he wasn't the only one seeking to capitalize on opportunities. Emmanuel Joseph, a member of the Directoire regime, suspected that Jacobins could seize the opportunity of the existing poor state of affairs to stage a coup. Therefore, he wanted to act before them and stage a coup against his own government, securing his position in power. However, for this coup to be embraced by the public, the support of a beloved general was needed. Napoleon, who had returned from Egypt, seemed quite suitable for this role. These two, with common interests, eventually met secretly and devised a plan. They decided to implement the plan on November 9, 1799. Sise and Napoleon's brother told the members of the Bonaparte Council that they would stage a coup to overthrow the Jacobin government. The council members were taken to a chateau at Seine Club outside Paris for their security. They were doing what they were told, but they were unaware that they had been taken out of Paris to facilitate the coup. When Napoleon, along with his soldiers, entered the room where the council members were, forcing the vulnerable council members to resign, they would realize the mistake they had made. Thus, the coup was carried out bloodlessly. The newly established government dissolved the constitution, and all authorities in France were handed over to the three consuls. These were Sise, Ducasse, and Napoleon. Napoleon became one of the three people governing France. However, France was still at war, and to solidify his position, he needed to win this war. For this purpose, he took command of his army and, along with his soldiers, crossed the Alps, descending into northern Italy. There, he defeated the coalition armies led by Austria and forced them into peace. As a result, the Treaty of Amiens was signed on February 9, 1801. This treaty marked the end of the Second Coalition, leaving England once again alone in war, and indicating that things were getting significantly complicated on the other side of the English Channel. President William Pitt, who had failed in both coalition wars in England, resigned, and the newly formed government signed the Treaty of Amiens with France on March 25, 1802. Napoleon had once again dissolved the coalition against his country. The streets of Paris echoed with his name, and the people saw him as a savior. Taking advantage of this rise, Napoleon declared himself consul for life. However, not content with this, just 2 years after becoming consul for life in 1804, he presented a vote to the public, asking them whether they wanted to see him as their emperor. According to the results, more than 99% of voters approved Napoleon becoming the emperor. While the reliability of these results is debatable, Napoleon's popularity among the people was quite high, and he had substantial support. After the results, he declared himself emperor. Throughout his military career, Napoleon consistently seized opportunities and never shied away from responsibility. This was one of his most important characteristics. On December 2, 1804, in a ceremony held at Notre-Dame Cathedral, he was crowned by Pope Pius VII. He was now the emperor.